do want to acknowledge that we are located on the lands of the Coast Salish peoples, and specifically address our Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations as those that we're looking to continue to collaborate and make meaningful connections as we move forward in our reconciliation efforts. But with that, so Howard is joining us from Santa Monica, I believe. So he's not in that virtual background behind him, but I trust he is going to share a little bit that he's prepared with us. But let's give Howard a virtual or audible welcome for me anyway. Howard, thanks for joining us. I'll change my background so you're not staring at yourself here, because that can get a little weird. But if you want to share your deck, we can get going as soon as you're ready.
Sure. Well, thank you. Oh, yeah. Well, thank you, Ted. Welcome aboard, and thank you very much, Dennis. I've known Dennis since the start, I think, of the Center for Digital Media. So I've known him a long time. I've been involved in it a lot. I'm a big fan of Vancouver. I love it. I love Vancouver a lot. So, and I had the opportunity to really hone in my business skills, which really made a difference once I entered the video game industry. And I love the West Coast. And so I actually have a place up in West Vancouver, and also I was in Santa Monica. I'm just a little bit outside of Santa Monica in Brentwood. But it's a real hotspot for the video game industry. So what I'd like to do is I put a pitch deck together about my life journey, and I'm hoping that maybe you can learn something from this and ask questions about it, because I really didn't know where I was always headed and where I was going, and you'll see that from my journey. But I'm very satisfied. I have no regrets. And so without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and go through this with you.
That's great. Thanks, Howard. And it is appreciated. And it's you've known me before the program even launched, because it was I guess you'll touch on that too when we get to the province and the gift and what this all connects to. But yeah, it's and you've worked with this guy behind me too, Glenn Entis. Actually, it's the degrees of connection. It's all there. But now that your deck is up, the floor is yours again. Take it away.
Right. So anyway, I consider myself a seasoned business executive. I'm a consultant. Some people consider me a video game agent, but I also do a lot of strategic and financial planning. And I'd like to go through just the major points of my life journey. As I mentioned before, I live in West Los Angeles. I spend most of my time here now, and I also have a place in West Vancouver. I've had to restrict my travels to BC because of the pandemic, but I was up in Vancouver and Whistler over the holidays. And once this pandemic starts to ease off, I plan to visit Vancouver more frequently. It's really a place that's dear to my heart. So what I'd like to do today is just share with you what I'm doing today. I think you'll find it pretty interesting. And interspersed with that, I'd like to just go over some of my key learnings from my experience, quotes from people that I find very important to me, tidbits of information, and some of the decisions that I've made along the way. I'm going to break it down into my early career before I was in games, where I really considered myself really learning my trade, and then my career in games, which I consider a fascinating journey. I'm very passionate about the video game industry, and I'm on Zoom calls every day with people all over the world. So I'm totally immersed in this, and then we can answer questions. But I know when I first started out in my career, sorry, I went to this too fast. I didn't know exactly, it was kind of a blur where I was going to go. I kind of had an idea, but I wasn't really sure. And as you'll see from my career, I kept changing my path as I learned more. And I think that's okay. And so we'll go through that a little bit. Now, before I go into that, I just, because I do a lot of market research and I do a lot of strategic planning. I just want to point out how big an opportunity the video games industry is. It's estimated to be around $180 billion globally today. And during the depths of the pandemic, the industry actually grew 23%, while the global film industry decreased 71%. And I love films. I have nothing against films, but it's just how strong this industry is. It's projected to grow at 9% on average annually, over the next 5 years. And this doesn't include VR, AR, the metaverse. I suppose it probably includes some 5G, but there's just an immense amount of opportunity, and it really is global. The video game industry, which I find hard to believe, is 14 times larger than the global film business. Even if you were to add in streaming, TV streaming, which is really big today, it pales in comparison to the video game industry. There's estimated to be, I have 2.8 billion gamers here. I think today it's 3 billion now. And the United States and China make up 53% of the market, global market. That's how large those markets are. And then the top 10 countries make up almost 80%, and Canada would be high in there. Canada is actually ranked 3rd in the world for game development. So it's a very attractive and area to develop games that has a very skilled workforce. Now I'm married with 6 children. I get a lot of reactions to that. I have to tell you a story. When I was at Disney, I had a silver pass, which meant I could go anywhere for free at any Disney property. And when our kids were young, my wife bought a green quad stroller, which was to me obnoxious. But we decided to take that to Disneyland one day. And of course, 4 of the young kids were in there, and we had 2 kids walking. And we were walking down Main Street at Disneyland, and we could not get off Main Street. We had so many people coming up to us and telling us our life story. So we walked down Main Street, and by the time, it took 4 hours. So we left after that, but that's how much attention we got. I'm not sure I really recommend having 6 kids, but we have a very entertaining personal life with our children. They're all older and working now. And I've got a picture here in West Vancouver when they were much younger. I'm a dual citizen of both the United States and Canada, and I just love the fact that I can travel between these 2 countries freely, and I understand both cultures now. When I grew up in the United States, I didn't really understand Canada, and I think Canada is kind of overlooked a little bit. The first recommendation I have is stay active. As you get older, by staying active, you're going to be able to have a much more successful career and business life, and a much more energetic life. And it's hard to believe that when you're younger. So I took up yoga, running, hiking. I do all kinds of hiking, both in British Columbia as well as in there's a lot of hiking in Los Angeles. Play golf. I do skiing, travel. I scuba diving. I was scuba diving in Thailand a couple of years ago. But by staying active, you're going to feel more alive. You're going to have more energy. You're going to be thinking better. I just can't say this enough. Currently, I'm CEO of Lunar Consulting. It's a company I set up myself in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is a hotspot for video games. Just in Santa Monica alone, Riot Games that developed has 3,000 people on its campus. And just with one game, League of Legends, it does $1.5 to $2 billion annually in sales. And that doesn't even include the mobile game that was distributed in China. They've got Naughty Dog, which did Uncharted, one of my favorite games. I don't know if you've played that, but also The Last of Us. And then Sony Santa Monica, which does God of War, which the boss battles are out of this world. They're just amazing. But I basically, as I said, I'm a business consultant. We try to help out in any way we can. But for the most part, people need to raise capital for their games. And that gets to the business side. And if you don't understand the business side, you're going to have a hard time raising capital. I'm going to give you some very specific examples of how difficult it is, because fundamentally, when you're asking an investor or an organization to provide you with money, there's a business transaction, and they have to evaluate if that business transaction makes sense to them, and it's complicated. And so that's where that's where my company helps out with doing that. But also we do M&A, which is mergers and acquisitions. Today in the video game industry, M&A is so hot. It's just, and all you have to do is read the news. I don't have to tell you what's going on. It's very hot right now. So
I think we should though, just because this is a recording, Howard. And again, this last week has blown a lot of our minds with Sony acquiring Bungie and the Microsoft basically acquiring everything in the world. I mean, I guess the M&A is very happening right now in the game space. But yeah, it's I guess there's a lot of activity around that, and even here locally, we've had a consolidation of certain companies like Eastside Games Group, with Eastside Games a part of that, acquiring Truly Social Games, which was one of our tenant companies. A lot of action there. But I wanted to give you a breather too, but on the recording, that's kind of what If this is viewed 5 years from now, and we're all like, "What about all these M&As?" That's what was going on. You're stamping time, folks. You'll thank me later.
Well, what's driving this mergers and acquisitions activity is the shortage of skilled talent and the risk profile of original IP, which is what gamers really want. And so when an IP becomes valuable and it has a long trajectory, now with games as a service, these games can last 5, 10, 20 years in studios too. That makes these companies valuable. And because there's so much money being earned, there's a lot of money on the sidelines to be able to invest. And so what companies are doing is they're scooping up these companies that either have very skilled talent or they have a very valuable IP. And they're paying premiums. On average, they pay 7 times revenue and well over 20 times what I call EBITDA. I don't know if you know what that is, but that's basically a profit number. And EBITDA is the earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. But this is the key number that people use. Now, in Microsoft's case, they did this acquisition because their installed base for the Xbox is only half. It's estimated, they don't release these numbers, but it's only estimated to be half of what the Sony PlayStation 4 is. The Sony PlayStation 5 and Xbox X, they're just ramping up right now, so they don't have large installed bases. And they're losing money on that. And they're also trying to promote their Game Pass service. And they don't have, Sony has done a great job buying up AAA studios that can consistently release phenomenal top producing games, much more so than Microsoft. And by purchasing Activision, this actually puts them in a much more favorable position, and it's really going to help their installed base, their Game Pass, and put them in a much better position. And I actually had to write an article within one of my companies about the fact that Sony's going to not retaliate, but they're going to have to do something about that. And of course, we just read in the news that they're what they did. And of course, Tencent has become the largest video game company in the world, not through internal development, by making acquisitions. They actually own almost, I don't think they own 100% of Riot, but I think they own 97%. But they own they used to own 40% of Epic Games, and they have their investments in so many companies. It's unbelievable. and they've just done a really good job purchasing. I mean, I could go on for days, but
well, I'm just noting in the chat that Ted brought up the Weta Digital and the Unity deals too. Like, there's all these deals that are happening all around us around the
Well, the video game industry is fundamentally driven by technology, and that's why it's growing so fast, because you can take a game from the past that was developed on an old platform, and now you put it on a new platform, and all of a sudden it's a completely different experience, much different. And that's really what's driving the video game industry. And I don't see this slowing down at all. My oldest son works with me as a game agent. He was actually a game agent working with another company and decided to join me. And I also serve as a board director on several companies, and several of them are in Vancouver. I thought it might be interesting just to go over, these aren't all my clients, but these are just some of my clients. But Player First Games, when we met them a couple of years ago in Los Angeles, it was two guys and a pitch deck. And we got them a job we got them a deal with Warner Brothers. Now we also got them another deal, but they didn't think they needed to work with me. They thought they could do it themselves. And these are what I consider pure developers. And so they were meeting with tons of people, and they were talking to us on the side. And finally they said, we feel like we're close, but we're just not getting it over the hump. So we have to hire you. So they did it kind of reluctantly. And really within a matter of 30 days or so, we brought them two companies. Now I'll mention Warner Brothers. I can't mention the other company. We have confidential agreements we sign and so forth. And we raised over, even though they were starting out small, we raised over 20 million for them. And for a small company like that, that's amazing. Now they've just released a press release and a trailer, and it's called Multiverses. Now it's not meant to be a multiverse, but I think they're just taking the name and using that because it's such a hot name right now. But you can go, I mean, this game is going to blow it out of the park. I would encourage you to take a look at this trailer. If it doesn't do a $500 million minimum, I would be shocked. Now, I don't know. I'm not involved in the forecasting sales that would fall on Warner Brothers, but this is the title that's going to do very well. And it's just, it's an example of what can happen when an experienced business person works with experienced game developers. PlayCorp, which is located in Australia, is coming out with a survival game called Beyond Contact. We did a deal with Koch Media, which is based in Austria. Again, they weren't able to raise the money. They tried as hard as they could. They couldn't raise the money themselves. Off-World Industries, which is located in Vancouver. So anything that's an asterisk is located in Vancouver. They're a modding team. They came out with Squad. But when we met with them, it was quite clear they had no business skills. And so Tencent wanted to make an investment. The first question they asked was, how much are you worth? And this is the question you never want to answer. It results in so many deals caving by just throwing out a ridiculous number. And then when they say, what's your justification? You have no justification. You are dead. So I would avoid ads, just say, let us take some time to think about it. Because it's a complicated, you really want to be strategic and thought out when you come up with your valuation. And, that's not your job to come up with your valuation along the way. You're not spending time looking at how much you're worth. So we came up with we did an analysis. We actually did a cash flow discounted analysis because they had a game in the market. And we did a mini strategic plan, and they were really impressed. And all of a sudden, this deal came together very, very quickly. Saudi Arabia, I met somebody from Saudi Arabia in one of these 5-star hotels in Los Angeles. And I don't know if you've heard of this city called Neom. It's the city of the future, but they want to create a digital and video game cluster there. So they engaged me on contract, and I developed a 165-page strategic plan, and I developed a specific financial plan for a AAA game with a development cost of $250 million. They offered me a job at a ridiculous salary, but I just didn't want to give up my life to specifically devote to this. But look up Neom. It's just an idea of what's going to happen in the future on
I just
Earth.
saw there's a comment in the chat too with Neom. So it's obviously it's some awareness. But I do remember when you were saying that. I mean, as far as putting the deal together and them actually making you an offer. And again, when you say ridiculous, you mean ridiculously good. But I think the other thing that's important for people on the call to know is that you actually felt that you could turn it away, right? I mean, sometimes you got that the balance of work life, and I think you listing you have this family as your first point. I'm wondering. So what made you make that decision when somebody makes you an offer you can't refuse? How do you refuse it? How did you do that?
Well, it's difficult because remember, I had been meeting with them regularly. I had several meetings with the board of Neom and the board of this investment fund. And, so I was developed. Now, because of COVID, and I was over in Saudi Arabia and I couldn't get out of the airport. They closed the airport down. And I was in the home of a CEO who was providing most of the funding for this. So it actually was difficult, but I just felt like I had to make a decision because I would have had to commit at least the next 5 years of my life to this project. I mean, it was massive. They wanted to build a whole digital cluster in Neom, and they wanted me to actually design, the buildings. There were so many questions about the buildings. How should they be laid out? I mean, I could see it was a massive project, and they were very serious about this. And, when you think about Saudi Arabia, they're actually very forward thinking. I was very impressed with how forward thinking they are, considering, I don't know, to me, it's not a desirable place to live, but it was interesting how they were going to transform the desert into something that could actually be livable. And we don't have time to go over that now, but I was really impressed with what they were doing. Creative Labs is in Vancouver. It's, I don't know if you've heard of Creative Arts Agency. It's the largest agency representing celebrities.
Pauline Muller. I'm just trying to draw my EA connection.
Yeah, it's Pauline Muller, sorry.
Yeah.
And I've spent a lot of time working with them. We're still working with CAA. But they have a strategic initiative to get celebrities involved with mobile games. And they've got a couple serious projects with some top celebrities that they're working on right now. But we're actually talking about a deal that would involve more celebrities based on what's going on inside the video game industry.
That's great. And actually, just to draw one more connection to that. So Pauline is actually on our board now, and one of our alumni members, Michael Brynjolfsson, he works for them actually. So, and we've done one of our industry projects in the past with them. So degrees of connection, it kind of connects back, but I didn't realize you were involved. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I talk to Pauline all the time. So, I mean, CAA, I'm very impressed with them, but it is difficult to negotiate deals with celebrities. I will say that. Blink Moon is a company started by a special effects supervisor in the animation industry. They're doing a blockchain game. They just raised a significant amount of money. The game's called Bravelings. So that's a company working with Brass Token, another Vancouver-based company. The Chant is it's a horror video game that's based in Vancouver. So just think of yourself being in the woods and being at a retreat where it's supposed to be a revival of your soul, and you're given this drink and it opens up a third realm where all these monsters enter, and you're running for your life trying to get off this island in Vancouver. So it's really crazy. We did this, Koch Media fell in love with this game, and so they decided to fund the game. So they have a deal there. Pocket Pinata, we're working on several deals with them. Again, these are ex-EA people who I knew. But right now they're going to do a fairly large deal called Exo Racing. So they're suits for flying, and there's all sorts of different things you can do. And again, this is going to be a blockchain type game funded by Atmos Labs out of Los Angeles. I think most of you know Amped. I'm on the board for Amped. So they provide leading edge technology for entertainment. And then Good Gamer, I'm on the board of Good Gamer. They're based in Vancouver. They just released a blockchain game. They just made an announcement today on that. And it's called The Chosen One. So I'd encourage you to take a look at it. I'm actually quite impressed with what they've done because they started out really with nothing. And this game to me looks like it's actually going to do quite well. It's very, very well thought out. I was very impressed with what they did with so few people. Lava Bear, this is a AAA, this is a huge budget video game that we're working on with a Russian company that's decided to fund it. We're just working through the details of that right now. They were requiring them to move to Vancouver. Now it's not a requirement, so I don't know if they're gonna, that's why I originally put them on here. But this just gives you an idea of some of the clients that we're working with. And of course, we're working with a lot more clients.
Can I ask you on the relationship side quickly there too, because you'd referenced EA, and I think you're going to touch on your career, but I mean, a lot of these connections, you've built up over time, right? And is that how, like, how did you do your own biz dev for your own, Lunar L Studios as a consultancy and agency?
Well, I mean, a lot of it has to do with relationships, and also my son is an amazing cold caller. So in his
cold calls still exist.
Yes.
Okay.
In his previous employment in Vancouver, he worked for some companies where he had to do cold calling, and I can't think of a harder job to do. Most people don't last very long. He loved it. He is not afraid to cold call and set up meetings. He'll call top executives at Activision, Warner Brothers, 2K, and we'll sometimes get into meetings we don't belong in, but we're in the meeting, so we have an opportunity to do deals. And so I think we really work. I mean, I know we're related by family, but I think we actually work together very well. And networking is so important. And that's one of the things I learned when I was the president and chair of DigiBC is the number one, when we did events, and of course we did a ton of events, networking was number one by far.
Yeah.
There was nothing else more.
No, and I'm glad you're bringing that up, and because this touches on a few things for everybody that's in our program, is that we draw on all these skills that are around us, and we have the developers, the artists, the designers, the producers, PMs, but the business development, the actual sales, the business acumen, it's needed. It's often overlooked, and we've had some very some companies with a lot of potential not necessarily go all the way because they were missing some of those elements. So it's great that you were bringing that up, and it's also nice to see you recognizing the efforts that your son's putting forward. So yeah, and I'm totally on board with the whole networking, and I'm appreciating, because I do remember your time as board chair at New Media BC when we started running the International Partnering Forum. I was all about bringing the people together, and you were one of them. So thank you for that.
Okay, well, thank you, Dennis. I'll get into it a little bit more. As I say, to put these deals together takes a lot of work. I'll get into that a little bit later as I give some examples. And that's what we do. We look at where the holes are in the pitch and what they're doing and what might be missing, some of the questions they're not able to answer. And we try to fill those in. We have standard business templates that we use. We have contract terms that we help with. And we have people practice before they go into these meetings. These are not casual meetings. This is one of the biggest mistakes that video game companies make. They think they're going into a casual meeting, and you're not meeting with friends. So if you treat it like a casual meeting, you're going to have a very difficult time. Sometimes it can work, but it's generally, as I say, there's this business transaction that forces issues out. And so you have to address those. This is my favorite quote by far. It's influenced me a lot in my career. I wasn't all that confident when I first started out in my career, obviously, when you're just starting out and you're just trying to find your way through. But it's not the situation you find yourself in. So someone says, well, I've been dealt a bad hand, or, they're not treating me well, or I wasn't given a chance to show my true skills. And so that isn't what matters. It's what you do about it. So if someone isn't treating you well in a situation, then you should get out of it. But oftentimes that's disguised for something else that's the issue. And so, I'm constantly evaluating. I find myself in a situation, And what am I going to do? Look, the pandemic, am I still going to network during the pandemic? I have to make a decision, and I want to do it in a safe manner. And I've got some examples of people, on a tightrope, but I've had to deal with some very significant challenges in life and make some key decisions. And sometimes it means you have to make a few sacrifices in life in order to achieve what you want. And other times it says, you know what, the sacrifice just isn't worth it. So I'm going to do this. And Tony Robbins is someone who you may know, you may not know. Some people consider him a quack. But he is this one that's known for the fire walks. And I actually went on the fire walk, and I was a non-believer, but I'm definitely a believer in his methodology because I've applied it in my life, and I've been able to excel my career significantly as a result. And I'm sorry, I don't have time to go over what that is right now. But I'm going to go over a few things in a minute here that are going to show what you need to do to succeed. Now, often I found myself comparing myself against people I went to school with at university, or I was working alongside. Well, I'm not good enough, or I'm better than they are, or whatever it is. You know what? We're all on a different journey, and it's okay. You don't have to be like everybody else. You don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to be a business person. You need to be who you are. Now, I'm showing you a map of LA because LA has a freeway to get to anywhere, and you can use 10 different freeways to get to the same place. And it's just kind of an example of, you don't have to go on this freeway. You can choose a different freeway. You can choose a different road. You can choose a back road. You can do whatever you want, and you can still get to the same place. And I would really encourage you to spend less time comparing. If you are doing that, just look at yourself and what you can do and what you can accomplish and what you need to do going ahead. You're going to be a lot better off and less worrying. The other thing that I had to learn is I didn't think big enough when I first started out. And it's because, I was very task oriented. I have to get this task done. I have to and yes, getting tasks done is very good. That's when you're looking down. But at some point you have to look up, where am I headed? And when you're looking down, it's very hard to see where you're going and think about something that's exciting. So I would really encourage you to set a very high goal for yourself, one that is unachievable. And this goes into Tony Robbins a little bit, because you're going to once you do that, you're going to start subconsciously figuring out how you get there. And it's not going to happen overnight. And if it's a big goal, it's going to happen over 5 to 10 years. It's kind of like deciding to climb Mount Everest. Obviously, you can't, book your arrangements tomorrow and go there. There's a lot of training. There's a lot of things that need to happen. But if you're committed and determined and persistent, you will get there. Those characteristics are very, very important. And it's okay to get advice and support. In fact, I would actually encourage that. If you try to do it yourself, you're probably going to fail. When I first started my career, I devoted all my time to my career. Of course, then I got married and had kids and everything. But irrespective of that, over the long term, it's hard to be successful if you're spending all your time at work. And believe me, when you're developing a video game, I don't know if you've heard of crunch, but everybody is talking about where you have to work 24/7 to get the game out the door. But I think you really need to think about who you are, what's important to you. Think about your home life, your fun, adventure, hobbies, your health. If you don't have your health, and as I get older, I have a lot of people I know, they don't have their health, so they're not able to work like I am. But I feel I feel like I can work just like I did when I was in my 20s and 30s. And, friends and family. And, you will have to make sacrifices and you'll bounce back and forth. But I would really encourage you to make sure you have a balanced life. Over the long term, it's really going to benefit you. Now, I want to go over my early career before games. I wasn't thinking about video games. I wasn't playing video games. I had just graduated from school, but yes, there were video games when I got out of school. But my first job was at PricewaterhouseCoopers after I graduated from university. and I joined the audit staff there. And I happened to be an analytic, I aced calculus. I ended up being a tutor for calculus when I was at university. And so I was analytical. I thought this would be a good career. And, I learned a lot about business from doing that, but I decided I didn't want to be an accountant. It was too narrow. But the best thing I learned was to be skeptical, a healthy sense of skeptical. And I don't mean negative, but not everyone's plan is good. In fact, there's probably fewer good plans than there are. And, it's just that a good plan takes a while. And some people aren't interested in putting enough time to have a plan or to convey information. And it didn't matter whether I was at Disney or EA or some indie studio. There are people getting up and talking, and they don't always have their facts straight. So, and I'm not trying to be negative in a sense, but if you're going to join a company and they're telling you what the plan is and it's not very good, guess what? You're going to go down a hole with them. It's going to be very difficult to help them in that case. And maybe you can be the solution, but this is just one of my learnings. Now, when I left there, when I decided I didn't want to be an accountant, I went to Unisys. It's headquartered in Detroit. So I grew up in Michigan. I went to University of Michigan, and then I worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers in Detroit. Then I joined Unisys, and I managed their whole international business unit, and that represented 40% of the company. And I got a master's in international finance and economics. And, so we had to manage currencies, and, it was actually quite complicated. I actually learned a lot from it. But I was giving a presentation in Malta, and they offered me a job to head up mergers and acquisitions. And so when I got into the mergers and acquisitions, and remember, this was a Fortune 500 company. This is a huge company. I was asked, hey, we need to know who we should be buying or not. And so they had me I developed a computer model that in one day I could tell them whether this company was worth pursuing or not. I could tell them what the impact was, what the issues were. And I had to actually set up a whole process, but this computer program would actually spit out what the results were. And so, I got a lot of recognition for that. And so the executive VP of the whole corporate, second in command, called me up to his office and said, hey, this, what you're doing is phenomenal. I've never seen someone be able to do this so quickly. And then he goes to his whiteboard and he's scribbling all these names. And I would want you to investigate all these things. And I said, well, that's impossible. I need more time. And he's pointed at me, said, don't ever tell me something is impossible. Now get your ass out of here and get to work. And of course, I was taken quite aback from that, especially after I just developed this computer model. But he taught me something, that nothing is impossible. And as I started wallowing in how I felt afterward, I began to think about how I actually could deliver what he wanted. And I was able to do that fairly quickly. And so this was a very good lesson for me to realize we may not have all the answers at the moment, but if we think about it enough, we can get those answers. And a lot of what we think is impossible can be possible. Now, from there, I went to work as a Cfo of Merrell Publishing, which was a medium-sized educational publisher in Columbus, Ohio. It's generated about $100 million a year in revenue. It was highly profitable, and I thought I was going to spend, a long time there. And 3 months after I started, it was owned by Bell and Howell on debt leverage. They couldn't make their debt payments, and he told me, "Hey, we want you to go and sell it." I'd never sold a company before, and I said, "Sure, I'll sell it if you want me to." And yes, we want you to sell it fast. So I had to stop talking to people in the company, which was a little weird. I had to put an investment deck together. I had to hire some investment bankers, and the long and short of it is I was able to sell it for $300 million into a group called Macmillan McGraw-Hill School Publishing Company in New York. And then they gave me a huge bonus for doing it. And I thought, Jesus Christ, I know how to sell a company. But when I first started the project, I didn't really think that was possible. Now, when I got into this group, Macmillan McGraw, I found out after I took the job that they'd contributed 11 losing companies. and that it was going to be spun out, and neither Macmillan nor McGraw-Hill was going to contribute any money, and it was losing a ton of money. And so 50% of the people had to be fired on day one, not day one, but soon after. Of course, the morale was low. And I thought this thing was just going to go down the tubes. But it eventually sorted itself out and became the largest educational publishing company in the world, and very profitable. So McGraw-Hill bought it back for $2 billion. So it's kind of I kind of learned a lot that, you know, when everything looks like it's never going to happen, it can happen. It's just a matter of making good decisions as you go through that. And these skills are really what helped me in the video when I started getting involved in the video game industry. Now, after McGraw-Hill bought it back, you know, I kind of thought, you know, I think I should try to do something else. So I got an offer from Disney out on the West Coast, and you know, it was in Disney Interactive, and they wanted to create an interactive division focused on education. And I wasn't sure if I was sold on it, but I said, I want to work for the Walt Disney Company. I'm just going to take the job and let the thing roll the way it was. In my first meeting with the CEO of the Disney Interactive Education, I didn't agree with anything he was saying. So, but anyway, I had to develop this. I had to develop a tenure strategy. And so one of the things we came up with is an online world called Curio, which was embedded with learning for elementary schools. And it was meant to make learning fun. And Disney had a city that they had created from scratch called Celebration in Florida. And of course, they hired all the educators there. So we used the educators there. And then we used the Imagineering group, which develops the theme parks, to create the world. So we created this world with embedded learning activities. And we presented it to Michael Eisner, who was the CEO at the time. And he basically said, hey, this looks pretty good. You know, we want to go ahead with this. But then when we started showing it to the schools, they didn't have the technology. And so we had to abandon the project. And I had to, when they abandoned the project, I actually got promoted to VP of Finance Administration for all of Disney Interactive, which was kind of, again, kind of a surprise to me. But one of the things that I had to do while I was there is, and it was required for any executive, I had to retrace Walt Disney's steps. So if I went to Disneyland, I would go, there's an area there that shows the whole history of the park. So we would spend time there. We would spend time in the condo that Walt Disney built, and we would learn how he thought and how he grew this. And he's quite an amazing person. And I'd highly recommend, if you have a chance, just read some of the books about Walt Disney. Some of the stuff he does is just utterly amazing. And I'm sorry, but I don't have time to go over it here. But one of the things on my first day when I joined Disney was, instead of, you know, filling out paperwork, you know, to get absorbed, you know, to get processed in the organization, I had to watch a video. And basically Walt said, I only want people with big ideas. If you don't have a big idea, you don't belong here. And so kind of obviously got me thinking. On my first day, I'd never had that happen to me before. And obviously we were working on a big idea. But, you know, Disney, working for Disney was just amazing. Just being inside that company and just all the experiences I had were so valuable. And I was getting offers from Marvel and EA and all kinds of other people. And now, when I got the offer from Marvel, at that time, they weren't as big as they were today. You know, they were a comic book company. They had kind of a fractured past. And so I didn't take the job. It was in Beverly Hills. I took the job at Electronic Arts in Vancouver. I was just taken by the city. It was an amazing place. And I'm going to go over that in a minute. But I just want to share a couple quotes that have meant something to me from Walt. He has a lot of famous quotes. But this one, all our dreams can come true if we have the courage to pursue them. Now, there's a documentary about Walt before Mickey. And you're going to understand this quote a lot better if you watch that documentary. But he went through a couple bankruptcies and failures. And it wasn't until he hired a business person until he became successful. And I'm not going to go into the whole story, but it's just fascinating what happened to him and what he had to do to make this thing succeed. But this other one, first think, second dream, third believe, and finally dare. It's kind of an interesting thing because, when he came up with the concept for Disneyland, everybody told him he was going to fail and the Walt Disney Company would be bankrupt. And of course, none of that happened. And nobody understood that Walt had been touring the world, looking at all kinds of theme parks and done all kinds of research on it before he actually, started building Disneyland. And of course, no one would give him money, so he created this Sunday night show on the wide world of Disney. And when they opened the park, it wasn't finished, but they had so many people there they couldn't let them all in. It's just kind of an example of how powerful that he is. So I was made an offer by EA Canada in Vancouver because they wanted someone who could help them grow this business into one of the largest studios in the world. And they thought I was the person. I'm sure there are a lot of other people that could have done that, but they hired me. One of the things we did when we first started is we treated it as if it was an independent studio on its own, and we held quarterly meetings just like you would if you were a public company. And it was a lot of work that I had to do. It was a lot of work, but we learned how to manage the studio at a very high level, and it became quite demanding. And we actually held these meetings with the top executives at EA down Redwood Shores. So it was really a very good experience and helped us grow it. I was the first person to prepare a strategic plan because at Disney, that's all they do. You have to prepare a 5-year strategic plan. They don't go with budgets and all that kind of stuff. It's all strategic. So I developed a strategic plan and I integrated it in with the executive producers of all the product lines. I said, we're going to second guess every game we have here. And I was actually able to grow this up to $1 billion. And keep in mind, this was a indie studio called Distinctive Software. It was very tiny. And we grew this into $1 billion studio. And I actually oversaw the construction, and I worked with the architects and all the consultants to build this campus that you see here now. I don't know if you've been there, but this is one of the most impressive buildings in Vancouver. It's around 600,000 square feet. It has the largest motion capture studio in the world, all kinds of sound effect studios and music studios. And of course, FIFA's there. But one of the biggest successes was Need for Speed Underground. And so we were doing Need for Speed, which was an exotic car racing game, which everybody loved, but it wasn't selling it was selling enough units, but no one was happy with it. So we came up with Need for Speed Underground, and the sales went up 12x. It was about street racing, and it actually beat out FIFA that year. I think it had over 700 million in revenue that year. And of course, I changed the green light process because EA had a tendency to not want to approve new IP. And I wanted to approve new IP if I thought it was good. And we had a process that we used. And so all these titles I've listed here, SSX, Def Jam, NBA Live was already there, Fight Night. These are all things we approved that EA ordinarily wouldn't have approved, and they were all very large successes, not of the scale of Need for Speed Underground. So I really learned how to scale a big company. It was, I have to say, I was, it seemed impossible, but I just kept, working at it, working with people, and over time, it really all happened. Now, the problem is it became toxic. People thought that they could do anything. I heard words like, we're going to be the next Disney. And of course, I knew they wouldn't, because I knew who Walt Disney was, and there was no Walt Disney there. And that's nothing bad about EA, but they're trying to be somebody who they shouldn't have tried to be. And they stopped valuing their employees. Then they had a class action lawsuit against them that they lost and so forth. I'd long lost. So I created this company called Propaganda Games in Vancouver. I was the one that initiated. I brought along 3 other people from EA. And I said, they wanted to raise the money. So I attended all these meetings with them. And of course, none of them were real. And I said, hey guys, I'm not going to meet with people that aren't interested in funding this and aren't willing to sign a contract, which one of the things you're going to learn, talk is cheap. So I said, hey, I know some people at Disney, they're interested in this. So in one meeting, I'm not going to go into the details of, there were 15 Disney executives there, and I convinced them to give us $600,000 to start the studio, and they really wanted to make a commitment to them. Now later on, that increased to 30 million. So they funded 30 million to develop Turok, which was a AAA game. We had over 200 people in the studio, and then they decided they, wanted to buy us. We had a long-term contract with them anyway. And I decided that was the best thing to do because the team wanted to develop AAA games, and to get that kind of funding. And with what Disney wanted to do, I thought that was the best thing to do. So this became a huge success story. And I have to say that while founders and that you choose, they may seem like they're okay, but remember, you have to work with these people closely. We had a lot of problems within the founder group. And, it's really unfortunate. We were able to get by with all the conflicts that we had. But I guess all I can say at this time is choose your founders wisely, because there's a lot of founders that don't get along. So I sold the studio to Disney. And I handled that mostly myself. I was promoted to VP of studio operations for all the studios. I directed all the strategic planning for all the studios globally. All the planning templates and everything that they used, they adopted. I helped buy and set up studios in Austin, Shanghai, and Chicago. I participated in the redesign of Mickey Mouse. So Mickey Mouse wasn't deemed to be cool enough to be in a video game. So we got Disney and Disney does not allow anyone to change. Mickey Mouse is the first and only time they've allowed anyone to change Mickey Mouse. And he appeared in a new game called Epic Mickey. I tried to have this done in propaganda. It was turned down by the team, which I was really saddened about. So it ended up being produced in Texas. And it became the #1 seller on the Wii. It only came out on the Nintendo platform, but it was a huge success. And he was supposed to be the next Mario. Unfortunately, the team down in Texas didn't really understand that, so it did eventually fold. And then I got an offer to, Disney decided to change gears more to a licensing strategy, which I wasn't interested in. I got offered a position to be a partner in a venture capital company, and I joined the venture capital company because I thought it'd be great to really learn how venture capital makes decisions on companies. Little did I know the fund was in trouble, and I was brought in to help turn it around. They actually it had a negative IRR, so internal rate of return. This is how investors evaluate these types of funds. And so I had to help turn it around. And one of the things I had to do is have more transparency. One of the things that wasn't happening, we weren't transparent with what was going on with our investments. I actually developed a detailed schedule so any investor could call me and I could tell them right that day what the current IRR is and what the forecasted IRR was. And we turned it around. Our IRRs were over 100%. And we ended up in the top quartile by the time that I left. I was involved in 12 investments and 7 successful exits. And I left because they decided not to invest in video games anymore, which I totally disagreed with. And I realized it was political and there was nothing I can do about it. And I don't fault anybody, but that's when I started my own company in Los Angeles. And I learned a lot about venture funding that's very valuable to me today and allows me to be successful.
Well, I'm just going to give you a breather really quickly before we move on from that, because Recon is kind of connected to our family here too, because of they were 4 founders coming out of UBC in 2006 that had an idea, and they drove it so far and eventually did a sale through Intel that you said almost failed, but you saved it, which is awesome. because that success begot some additional investment in Vancouver, because I know Thinkific and others are, there's a bit of a long tail there. I posted an article on the untold story for the students on the call, but again, it's interesting to hear some of these behind the scenes things, because it's sometimes it's timing, it's the right person, keep something alive, and they are continuing to invest in our local ecosystem. So I just wanted to give you a breather and reference.
Yeah. Well, Recon Instruments was considered the top investment at Vanedge Capital, and that's the first. While I was doing this, I guess, reevaluation of the fund, this was touted as the best investment. So my first day with the CEO and CFO, we were talking, and of course, because I have a financial background, I asked them what their sales forecast was, and they told me it was 22 million. I said, well, just show me how you got to that. And they were going through it, and it, Joe said this, Sally said that. I'm sorry, those don't count for a forecast. So at the time we got done, I said, you only have support for 4 million. And I said, you're hiring people like mad. I would suggest you put a freeze on hiring, which I knew what the reaction was going to be. It was going to be very negative. And of course, we got into big debate about that. I had to schedule a whole meeting with the fund about this particular thing, because I was not going to back down. And they refused to cut down on their hiring. And at the end of the day, they came in at 4 million. I was right. Now, I didn't know if I was right. I was hoping I was wrong. But now they'd hired all these people, they couldn't afford them. I had to do a special structuring. I had to do a special fundraising. I had to do it twice to save them from bankruptcy. And then we brought on 2 strategic investors. One was Intel. I can't mention who the other company was. And then we got them to actually buy that for well over 100 million. I can't state the amount. I don't know if it's public, but an insane amount of money considering the position they were in. But the technology, the sports heads-up display they had was phenomenal. I thought it was a great idea. It was just some of the execution, I think, could have been done a little bit better. But I mean, they had a great product. But this is the other thing, just getting rosy eyes around technology is another problem that I see. You still have to run a business. So I was, along the way, I was president and chairman of DigiBC, and before that, New Media BC. I was actually involved in the original $40 million funding for the Center for Digital Media, called Great Northern Way Campus. And, it took a lot of time and effort. I'm totally supportive of this. This is such a great thing, because when I started, there was no education specifically for digital media and video games. And so I was a big supporter of this and attended many of the events and very, very involved in this, along with other things. As Dennis mentioned, I met with GDC and got them to hold a GDC Games Conference in Vancouver. I started the Next BC Award Show for Innovation. And this turned out to be so popular because companies wanted to be known as the #1 innovator in these different categories. And so I was really proud of that. We talked about getting a digital media tax credit. They're offered in almost all the provinces. But when I went to the Minister of Finance, he kicked me out of his office and told me that he was never going to support the video game industry and hated it and and I got kicked out of his office. And so I had to figure out, how do I get this across the finish line? And I met with several people in the government, and they told me what I had to do. And I basically had to raise money, because all the other industries, they raised money, and no one was contributing money. So I had to raise $100,000, and there's a whole thing. But within 8 months of that meeting, he and I announced the new digital media tax credit. So I was saying, do you want to apologize to me? So it was, but that was one of the challenges. I mean, I thought I was dead in the water after walking outside of his office. But I also was able to attract a lot of companies to Vancouver. So I worked with Ed Capnell, the CEO of Pixar. They set up a studio in Vancouver, and I actually allowed some of the Pixar executives to be in my studio and propaganda games. And the game team was upset about it. I don't know why. But we got them to set up a really nice studio in Gastown, and I was working with Sony. Sony ImageWorks closed down all their animation special effects around the world, including in Los Angeles, moved it all up to Vancouver. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. And Lucasfilm, I was meeting with them in San Francisco, and of course, with the deal with Disney, they decided to move all of that. I mean, this is like phenomenal that they would move up to Vancouver. I mean, in my opinion, and so also Bandai Namco and a lot of other companies.
But I think the influence of the tax credits made a huge part of that. I mean, the IMDTC and the DAVE, Digital Animation Visual Effects tax credit.
Well, I think the thing I'm proud of the fact that we were able to change their minds, but I actually created a model, an economic model to show them the benefit of this, which no one had done before. So that was actually quite instrumental. And we were actually able to show them how important and where the video game industry was headed. And they were so tied into film and animation at the time. And, you know, none of them grew up with video games. That's a problem. You go to government and they're all much older. And you talk about video games, they don't know what you're talking about. But I would hold events there and we would bring all these free video games and they'd swoop them up. And I said, I thought you said you didn't play. Oh, they're from my, you know, my son or my daughter or, you know, someone else.
But I think that's changing, right? Because now we have Brenda. We have one of our own in politics. So that's,
well, obviously it's going to change over time. But, you know, while I was doing this, you know, unfortunately it was, but I think the other thing that was important is I created a simple tax credit. The government always overcomplicates it. And the first iteration of it, I mean, I threw it back at him. I said, you could try to fill this thing out. I mean, give me a break. Do you want to encourage, you know, more people to get into video games here or not? And so this is the simplest video game tax credit, I think, in the world after they worked with us. So I guess my last thing, I probably ran over a little bit, but I think the thing I've learned is, you know, to have gratitude for everybody you work with. And that will go, you know, a long way to, you know, oftentimes we don't give people enough credit and particularly people that work in the industry. And so I would, you know, I feel very strong, you know, strongly about that. So I'm happy to take questions. You know, I know it's getting kind of late, but if you've got any questions or anything.
Yeah, well, so if you want, if you're at the end of the slide deck here, maybe you can do the stop share and then we can have a collective and I can keep an eye out and see if there's any hands or any questions, comments or otherwise, because make a little
yeah, well, I know it's been long and but you know, we could probably just have a session on how to pitch a game and be successful, you know, influencing people and what people look for. And this seems to be the number one, other than networking. How do I raise money? How do I get money for my game? And I've heard this.
Yeah. Actually, I remember so I'll throw a question at you because I had some of our students are about to pitch their own concept. We do our version of a Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, and they're going to be pitching. What is it like in your experience? What should they be looking at to sell the idea, the team, the product? Like, what is it that the investors look to when they look at? Again, this is, you know, what advice do you have for those that are at the early stage of their careers, but they have some experience and they maybe have some ideas and maybe some, you know. What would you suggest to them as they think about pitching?
Well, first of all, the video game industry is a hit-driven business. Yes, it's very large and there's a lot of opportunities. But by saying it's hit-driven means there's a lot of games that, you know, aren't successful, lose money. And a lot of people gravitate to mobile games, which is even more risky. So I think the average mobile game generates $1,000 in revenue. You're not going to get any funding for that. And so you have to figure out if it is a mobile game and you want to go with the less funding, you have to figure out how you're going to present that. So you have to understand what are the top grossing games, why are they grossing what they're grossing, and you need to also show why your game is unique. What are you offering that's so exciting? When I used to have to present at Disney, it was always thumbs up if you wow me, thumbs down if you don't. So you have to go over the top. It's got to be something that you don't have to show everything that you've worked on, but show something that's exciting. You can get an emotional reaction out of somebody. Now, a playable demo is the most influential thing you can do to raise money. If you've got a short playable demo that's impressive. Now, if it's not impressive, I wouldn't show it. I would say that's number one. Number two is the experience of the team. Now, if you don't have experience, then you have to showcase your skills, why you have the skills to do this. And if you don't have the skills, then if we're me, and this is what we do for this AAA project that I showed you, we recruited a whole bunch of AAA developers with a lot of experience onto the team, and that's how we got that approved. It's because we didn't have enough. Those are the, and then of course, market positioning, and this gets back to uniqueness. You really have to showcase why it's unique. And you never want to go up against a real successful game. It just doesn't go over well in these pitches. So a lot of people create a chart with, Y and X axes, and they show how this game is on a different part of the chart than the other games in the market. And that I find to be very influential in showcasing that. And then you have to show that it has revenue potential. So you want to show some similar games and how they've done, and really how it can generate the revenue it needs. Generally speaking, investors need to get a 3x return. So if they invest $1 million, they have to get 3 million back. I mean, this is a very crude rule of thumb. And this is, and some people actually go in with forecasts that, you can't make any money on. Well, you're dead in the water. You have no chance of getting funding. And I'm oversimplifying this. We have a huge, not huge, but we have a whole process that we go through in terms of getting ready for these meetings. And part of it is being able to answer their questions if you get through that. But the things I just mentioned are the most important things. The playable demo is so important, showing that you can actually, people are going to have fun with this demo. And that's what happened to that player first games with metaverses. They really there were 15 people. They had people, streaming in from countries all over the world. And it was unbelievable. I mean, ordinarily they should have never gotten approved by Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers is so tough to get through, and yet they got through that. So yeah. Preparation is really important.
No, thanks for that. And I know we're really heading into the extras here. So if some of you have a class commitment meeting, need a dinner, you're free to go. But I do see that, Natasha, you have a question. There's a hand up. I'm going to respect that. Howard, you still have time and you're okay to take a question, we'll go that route. So.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
great. Natasha, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you for the amazing presentation. The scale and the diversity of projects that you have undertaken is quite amazing. So my question to you is, what do you rely on? Do you rely on your self-learning when you are taking on unknown projects, or do you depend on hiring the right people or hiring the right experts for taking on that task?
Well, I mean, first of all, one of the things I've learned is when I go into meetings, and some of these meetings are with top level executives, and someone is trying to convince me to do something, and I go in with their idea, and of course it doesn't go over well, then I feel horrible. So I've kind of learned I have to go in with my idea, even if it came from someone else. I mean, I have to really buy into that and sell it. And if I can't, I should just go in with my own ideas. But the reality is you can't do anything by yourself. And this is one of the hard lessons that EA learned. Like when I left and they had this class action lawsuit, the stock price went from 90 to 20. And everybody said it can't go to 85, it can't go to 80, it can't go to 70. And it just kept going down. But the games were horrible. the quality went down because people they weren't engaged. EA wasn't appreciating them, and they just weren't accepting it. It took them 5 years. If you can believe this, it took them 5 years to really change and understand that their people were important, and they had to treat them like they were important people. They are the asset, right? You don't have machinery and equipment. It's the people that are important. So with video games, you want a strong team. And so you want to hire strong people around you, and of course the game is on a platform. So you have to have great engineers, great animators, great game designers. And, when we released Turok, the game design team wasn't as strong as it should have been. We should have spent more time getting a stronger game design team there. And I'm not trying to be critical, but these games go up a lot of competition. This isn't a hobby. This is serious business. So, and there are teams, small teams, I call them diamonds in the rough. They may not have been in the industry a long time. They may not have, people may not recognize them, but they come out and knock it out of the park like Black Box did with Need for Speed Underground that did over 700 million. Nobody knew who these people were. In fact, EA was laughing at them while they were developing the game. But this thing released, it hit like no tomorrow. And the whole industry was thinking, how do we copy these guys? So I'd say, I respect people that have their own opinions and ideas, but, and this is one of the things that isn't done enough. You need to do due diligence of your own ideas so you can really back them up when you go into a meeting. And this is one of the things that doesn't happen. People think they can show up, they meet someone, they think it all went well, but it was just, they were just talking on the surface. They didn't really have the knowledge they needed. And of course, that's going to be found out sooner or later. I don't know if I answered your question, but
yeah, no, thank you for that. I really appreciate I know there's no like black and white answer for this, but I just wanted to understand how you approach such a situation.
Yeah, one of the things I've learned is when you go out to pitch your game, one person will hate it, or company, another person will like it. And this happens too, and this is one of the things we have to advise with our clients. Don't get down if someone, again, it gets back to that quote I was talking about. You have to say, what happened in this situation? What should I do about it? And sometimes what you do about it is nothing. That's just that person's opinion. I'll go to the next meeting. But in some cases, it means, hey, I need to make a change. And that's what I'm trying to, a lot of people don't make those changes, right? It's just like if I was guiding a rocket to the moon, it's not going to get there unless they make a whole bunch of changes in order to get to where it's going. And you will find this will help you be very, very successful, is learning from your engagement in your meetings. If you're unprepared, admit it. I've gone into meetings unprepared. And then I say, hey, I was unprepared. I better study up on this. And one of the things that I've learned is, before I talk to people, I need to prepare. When I prepare, I do a better job than when I don't prepare. That's one of the basic learnings that I've had. And people, they do give feedback in meetings. We don't get feedback all the time, but you have to, just because you have one meeting and it goes well, to get money from somebody, there's a series of meetings, and inevitably it's going to end up with due diligence. So it's a process.
All right. Well, Howard, I think, I'm respecting the clock. I myself am running a little bit longer than what I was expecting, because I love taking advantage of your time and what you're gifting us tonight. So I'm going to extend again, thanks, 1,000 thanks. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in Vancouver again, with this being the 15th anniversary year. It's also going to be the 25th anniversary for New Media BC, DigiBC. So, hopefully we'll see you back up here in the not too distant future. And yes, thank you so much for everything. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight as well. And let's say thanks to Howard and enjoy your evenings. So thank you so much, Howard.
Well, thank you, Dennis. I appreciate meeting everyone virtually. Obviously, it'd be better if we could meet in person, but I think Zoom has helped us all during this pandemic to keep meeting with each other. May not be the best way of doing it, but I really appreciated the meeting, and I hope you got something out of it. Obviously, my journey is going to be different than yours, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm just sharing some of the learnings that I had along the way and what made a difference in my life.
And that is huge, and it's appreciated. We all extend thanks. The chat, I don't know if you have your chat window going up, but it's blowing up with thanks there as well. So it's
well, I've got my screen here, so I'm not seeing it. Oh,
yeah,
here.
probably not. Well, there you go. If you want to see I was just noting that because I was trying to keep an eye on it, but I was just like boom, boom, boom. There's so much
okay.
there. But yeah, it's anyway. Thanks again. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Till we meet again, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, Howard.
Thank you so much, Howard. That was so generous. Really appreciate it.
Ted, you
Okay.
liked it so much you joined us twice. I saw you in the Zoom.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I'm just picking my
we'll
wife
talk
up, so it was amazing though. I hung in there.
Nice. I saw
Okay.
that. Anyway, I saw that. Hey, thanks again, everyone. I'm the host, so when I hit the eject button here, I think it's going to end it for all. But Howard, thank you. Everyone who joined tonight, thank you. Let's continue this. And yeah. Anyway, love to
Okay.
y'all.